Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. A lot to talk about again today. Good, bad, and crazy martinis. We'll get to what we think is the resolution of the whole Signal fiasco and the announcement of the attacks on the Houthis inside the national security team. We'll also be talking about, obviously, the tariff situation. The market's still not happy this morning, but we're going to be talking a lot about what we heard from the Trump team on the Sunday morning shows. But we start with a look towards the 2026 midterm campaign, and we know from talking about it earlier in the year that there's a number of open Democratic seats, and one of them is in the state of New Hampshire, where Jeanne Shaheen is retiring after 3 terms. She defeated Senator John Sununu for that seat in 2008, and now that she is leaving, the president of the United States is hoping that former Governor Chris Sununu, the brother of John, will in fact decide to run for Senate, and he says that Chris Sununu has his full endorsement, which is interesting because these two have not been the best of buddies over the years, but I think Trump can read a political situation up there where Chris Sununu is most likely the best Republican option. Hats off to the Washington Free Beacon for bringing this up with Trump on Air Force One, and I think the new policy on who gets to go on Air Force One is probably responsible for this as well. President Donald Trump issued a forceful endorsement of former New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, who has been mulling a run for Senate in the Granite State in 2026. Quote, "He came to my office, came to the Oval Office, and I met with Chris Sununu, and I support him fully. I hope he runs," Trump told the Washington Free Beacon. "He's been very nice to me over the last year or so, but no, I hope he runs. I think he'll win that seat." And we just found out last week that Chris Pappas, Democratic congressman who's held that seat for he just won his 4th election in 2024. Usually wins by about 8 points in that district, so this will not be an easy race for Republicans. And of course, the midterms usually are tougher for the president's party. The NRSC is already out pointing out Pappas's votes on the Inflation Reduction Act, voting to allow biological males on women's sports teams, voting in favor of allowing the government to ban the sale of gas-powered cars, and his vote to support sanctuary cities. Pappas supporters will say he also voted to censure Rashida Tlaib. He also voted for the Lake and Riley Act, so he's more moderate, allegedly, than the Republicans would have folks believe up there. So, Jim, bottom line, and again, I'm sure this is all stemming from his appearance on the Three Martini Lunch, Chris Sununu, like we said the day Jeanne Shaheen said she wouldn't run in 2026, is most likely the Republicans' best chance, and it seems like he's much closer to making that decision now.
Greg, we have guests on this program so rare. The idea of a 2-time guest is just unthinkable. I believe we have a semi-socialist policy that we must go through all 8 billion people on Earth before we'll have somebody. But maybe in the case of Chris Sununu, if he runs for Senate, we'll make an exception. If he comes to town and wants to step into the studio, we'll be happy to have him again. And look, when we talk about the midterms, we're usually pretty good about putting in caveats and saying, look, there's a lot of time between now and then. We don't know what the country's mood is going to be like. We don't know what the issue environment is going to be like. Right now, it's a very tense economic environment. We'll be talking about that a bit more in our second martini. And so if as you mentioned, traditionally the president's party does pretty badly. The map had been looking pretty good for Republicans, and New Hampshire was a big part of that. You got an open seat, and if Sununu runs, you've got a guy who's won re-election over and over again. One of the things I think people kind of underestimate, because I know some folks up there who are, let's just say, more conservative than Sununu and see him as kind of, too moderate for their taste, too much of a squish. And just point out that, like, his dad was governor, John Sununu. If you don't remember the good times of him being White House chief of staff, go watch Naked Gun 2.5. The only National Review cruise guest who I believe has been mocked in a Naked Gun movie. So this is a family name that people have been voting for not just one generation, but 2 generations. So, like, whether or not you think that should matter, it does matter. There are a whole bunch of New Hampshire voters who are like, yeah, I know, I remember his dad, I know him as governor. They're going to be very inclined to vote for him for Senate. Does this guarantee a victory? Probably not, but it's, again, probably the best shot Republicans have of picking up this seat. And there could be a very big consequence for this, not just because of all the issues in all the other state seats that are up there, but this would be a big question about how many more judicial appointments does Trump decide to get, and how is Clarence Thomas feeling? How is Samuel Alito feeling? It's one of those things where, like, look, the Republican Party, there's a lot of turbulence, as they might say on an airplane. There's a lot of, unknowns between now and Election Day 2026. So you want is your strongest team on the field. Sununu looks like the strongest team on the field. And the president is being a team player, not letting old grudges get in the way of that. So that is very good news for Republicans. We'll see if it holds. We'll see if Sununu is, pulls the trigger on this. I think all in all, like if he wasn't interested, he'd be saying he's not interested. And so I certainly think this is a inching in that direction. There's a lot of time between now and then. He can, do some fundraising or do a listening tour or stuff like that. But he certainly seemed like a guy who's interested in running for Senate next year.
Yeah, I don't think you go to the Oval Office to meet with Donald Trump if you're not at least seriously contemplating this. It's interesting, just 3 years ago, a couple of things we talked about in that interview with him are, A, why did you decide not to run for Senate in 2022 against Maggie Hassan? Also that year, he had just come off some criticism for making fun of Trump at the Gridiron dinner. So it's amazing how much the picture changes in 3 years. But
ancient history, way back in the,
Yes.
Way back in 2022.
Hey, if Trump and little Marco can make up over time,
yeah.
I guess Trump and Chris Sununu can as well. So, look, if you're hoping to see what could be in the year to come, try BetterHelp. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. And look, if you feel like now is the time where you need some professional help to work through some of the things you're struggling with personally or professionally, give BetterHelp a really close look and give them a try. Because first of all, you're going to save money doing that. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session, which adds up fast. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save on average of up to 50% per session.
With more than 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, and it's served more than 5 million people all around the world. And it's convenient, too. You can join a session with just the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. And you can switch therapists at any time.
Your well-being is worth it. So visit BetterHelp.com/3ML to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/3ML. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini now. And I think a lot of people are still checking the Dow, especially after Thursday and Friday, when cumulatively about 3,800 point drop on the Dow, a significant percentage lost on the S&P as well. We'll be keeping an eye on that. We're promised that this will level off fairly soon, and I certainly hope that that's the case. But you spent some time investigating how the Trump team was talking about the tariff issue, why it was done, what they hope to achieve from it throughout the Sunday morning shows. And there was a whole list of people out there doing these interviews, from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to Trump's trade guy Peter Navarro to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. And the bottom line here from reading your Morning Jolt today, Jim, is that they're all very sure, and they're not exactly in agreement whether these are going to be temporary, or whether they're going to be permanent, whether they're designed to prompt negotiation to revisit things, or whether there's not going to be renegotiation, whether it's economic, whether it's national security involved. So what did you come away with?
I suppose I should begin by saying, yes, I'm generally pro-free trade. I am much more skeptical about the benefits of our trade policies with China. I think here the critics have a really valid point that they have built up their industrial base. We have become uncomfortably dependent upon them for certain areas like medication, anything involved in the defense industrial base, we should not be getting from China. And I think on the steel tariffs that Trump did earlier this year, it is pretty much indisputable, and you see this in every other country. China is now what we call dumping. They're selling steel at less than the cost of production all around the world. They had built up their steel industry because they were expecting a big housing boom. Housing bubble burst. They don't need as much steel as they did before. So they're just trying to get rid of it because they think to get back into equilibrium, the Chinese steel industry would have to be reduced by 30%. That's a lot of jobs. There's a lot of industries that are related to that. So on that one, I think they've got some valid points. On everything else, I am generally skeptical of this. And I guess you could say the good news is that whatever your perspective is, somebody in the Trump administration is making an argument you agree with. The bad news is they all contradict each other. Probably the clearest and most glaring one comes from Peter Navarro. The title is White House Senior Counselor on Trade and Manufacturing, but he's been Trump's trade guy for a long time. And he keeps emphasizing that these are permanent, or at very minimum, meant to be around for a long, long time. And he keeps emphasizing this is not a negotiation. It's not about negotiation. If you listen to our old friend Kevin Hassett, who's now the White House National Economic Council, he says this is a negotiation. And the great news is that 50 countries have reached out and they're ready to negotiate, and we're going to get a better deal. So it's simultaneously not a negotiation and it's a negotiation. So whatever your perspective, you're covered on that. Probably the argument that I'll put in the Fox Mulder poster in the X-Files, I want to believe. Mike Lee, Utah senator, looked at the footage of Hassett on the Sunday shows and said, look, zero trade barriers coming your way, good for America, good for the world. So the reason we're instituting the tariffs is we want all tariffs to go away. And the idea is we'll put this into place. Other countries will say, this hurts. And they'll decide to get rid of them and we'll have more free trade. If that is the ultimate result of all this, then I guess I would say good. I think, unfortunately, if you look at your 401k, you look at the markets, it's not working that way yet. Now, if that's the ultimate outcome, that would probably be the best outcome we could get, but we'll see. But there are also other folks like Scott Bessent who say that, no, the point of this is to bring in tax revenue. And the more people pay into this is going to be how we're going to pay for all the tax cuts that Trump wants to do. No tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime, all these other things that Trump wants to do to extend the tax cuts. We need the tariffs in place in order to pay for that. Of course, in the exact same interview, Bessent said, well, as we do this, more companies will bring their factories back here in the United States, so we'll be importing less. So our revenue that we'll be getting from the tariffs will be declining over time. And then he added, once the revenue from the tariffs are declining, then we'll lower the tariffs. So they're permanent new funding to cover the tax cuts until the money stops, which will happen in a few years. Which I find a little bit contradictory, but maybe some other people will see this differently. Trump was quick to emphasize this is about reciprocity. If you have a 15% tariff on us, we're going to put a 15% tariff on you. Also, it's not about that because Navarro says this is not about tariffs. It's the non-tariff cheating that's more important. Manipulating currency, dumping stuff, 19% VAT down in Europe. Quote, this is what people have to understand. It's the non-tariff cheating that matters the most. Now, I would prefer, you can't say every country on that list is currency manipulation because a bunch of them in Central America use the US dollar. You can't manipulate the money that we're using. So, he talks about intellectual property violations. Yeah, China's really bad on that. And my attitude would be go after China on that. Don't go after Luxembourg or some country that's not doing these sorts of things. These are really it just feels like they're grabbing every argument they can and throwing them up against the wall. Finally, look, there are things, the administration is not exactly the most precise speakers when they do this. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick was on Face the Nation, and he says, really, the primary reason for this is national security. He says, we don't make medicine in this country anymore. That didn't sound quite right to me, so I looked it up. So when it comes to the active pharmaceutical ingredients, remember the old commercials used to say active ingredients, include blah, 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 blah. We make 53% of the active ingredients used in U.S. Medicines. That's not all, but also you throw in Europe makes another 33%. So you put that together, you come out to about 86%. So we're not super dependent on China as some people would have. A lot of this started getting kind of resourced during COVID and things like that. We produce 22% of all the medicines in the world. We have 1,580 pharmaceutical production facilities. And I don't like it when the Commerce Secretary says, quote, we don't make medicine in this country anymore. That's just flat out not correct, right? He also said we don't make ships, and I've been getting some pushback on Twitter on this. Look, we have 154 private shipyards over 29 states in the U.S. Virgin Islands. There are more than 300 shipyards that engage in ship repairs and are capable of conducting ships, but are not actively engaged in shipbuilding activity. So we are making, now I've heard some people say, well, we aren't making big ships. Okay. All right, that's a fair argument. But don't say we don't have any ship making. Oh, by the way, let's point out the Jones Act, which if you're going to carry freight between U.S. ports, you want to go from, say, New York to Savannah or something like that, every ship must be built, owned, and crewed by Americans, and they must be flagged by the U.S. And there are a whole bunch of ships that don't, very few ships that meet that quality. For carrying liquid natural gas, for example, 0 ships meet those requirements. So they pay more because they're using those foreign ships. Everything you get through those ships, it costs more because of this. Steel, I mentioned, yes, I actually kind of agree with the administration's move on that. It's worth noting, though, that when they instituted steel and aluminum tariffs in the first Trump term, companies just figured out how to make stuff out of less steel and out of less aluminum. If you make something more expensive, people start figuring out ways to reduce the demand. And then finally, he said, we don't make semiconductors in this country anymore. Again, that's not the case. We have 95 semiconductor fabrication plants, 14 more than China, 15 more than Taiwan. We have 12% of global manufacturing capacity, and because of the CHIPS Act, we're expanding a whole lot. There are now $450 billion in announced investments across 28 states. So Lutnick said a whole bunch of stuff that really wasn't true, which I don't think is good. I think if you're going to make that. Oh, by the way, Elon Musk probably one of the most anti guys in there. I won't use all of his quotes. I'll just say that he was very critical of Navarro, and at one point said Navarro ain't built, and the S word. Navarro noticed it apparently, and in the interview with Fox News Channel yesterday said, well, he doesn't understand that. The thing that's important about Elon to understand, he sells cars. That's what he does. He's just a car salesman, Greg. That's all he is,
He's not Kurt Russell. He's the developer of Tesla, and he, SpaceX, Neuralink. I mean, this guy's at the forefront of a lot of different things. Yeah.
Elon's not right about everything, and he's a little more enthusiastic about trade with China than I'd like to be. And all, but I don't think he knows a little bit about the economy, right? I mean, let's give him a little credit. So you look at all this. There was a great classic Saturday Night Live sketch about something was a floor wax and a dessert topping, and you could use it for either one, right? Tariffs do everything. It's a panini maker. It does it's a Swiss Army knife. I am very skeptical of this. And as you can see, the markets are very skeptical of this. I think, and you see this from quite a few observers, if they had targeted this on China, I think the general public reaction would be more positive. I think the market response would be much more positive. I think there's a much stronger argument that we have really legitimate disputes about how China treats our imports than that island that consists entirely of penguins. I don't think they're really screwing us over and taking away American jobs. So, that's where we are on this. It's not great. It's been a big story for the last 3 days. I think it's going to continue being a big story. I wish there was good news on this front, folks, but looking pretty grim right now. Watch for falling stockbrokers.
Gosh. Well, I'm pleased to see things are getting a little bit better on the medicine front. I remember during COVID, we were almost entirely, or at least very much dependent on China for antibiotics specifically. So hopefully we're onshoring that. I feel like medicines should definitely more and more be made here. There are certain things just from a common sense perspective that probably ought to be made domestically. The other one that just boggles the mind, ammunition should probably not be made in China, given the tensions we're having in the world right now. But one of the other things, and you're going to have these intense debates, there seems to be a binary choice for some of those defending the policy that either you support the country or you support your 401k. I don't feel like that's a binary choice. And I think ridiculing people who do care about their 401k is probably not the way to win a political debate. But, we're early in the market correction here. We'll see how far it goes, obviously. But when people are watching significant chunks of the 401k disappear in the matter of a few days, I don't think mockery is the way to get them on board.
Hey, Greg, when inflation got really bad during the Biden years, do you remember how the snot-nosed liberals on Twitter and X responded? First of all, it was denial, right? There is no inflation. It's all in your head. Look at the gas light, all that kind of stuff. And then there was you shop at expensive places, and that's why you're paying so much. And, I remember a guy insisting you could get a crab cake sandwich for less than $12 in Washington, D.C. If they're selling it for less than $12, you don't want it. It means it's from last week, okay? There was this reflexive, my guy can't be wrong. You're not really experiencing the economic pain that you think you are, which was the attitude of these, knee-jerk defenders of the Biden administration. It's not going to do Republicans any better to insist, oh, no, your 401k is doing, or, oh, your 401, you must have bad investments. Mine is doing fine. Mine is doing, now, maybe there are some folks out there who are doing terrific. Let's face it, when the market's going down a couple thousand points a day, it's really bad. Right? There's no two ways about that. And I believe it's more, I want to say 62% of Americans own stocks. A lot of it through your 401ks or investment, individual retirement. Yeah, of course, Mr. Moneybags on Monopoly owns a bunch of stocks. But there are a whole bunch of Americans who don't, who basically have that buy and hold and who probably aren't going to get screwed over by this. But when your portfolio goes down 10%, 15%, 20%, it takes a while to get that back up. And for people who are close to retirement, they don't have that time to make up that. So don't downplay other people's economic pain. You think enough people would have listened to that in the first, in the last administration. But hey, mankind will learn at the altar of experience and at no other.
This callousness went the other way for a while, too, when manufacturing jobs were leaving and coal mining jobs were vanishing. What did we hear from the Democrats? Learn to code. So when other people have been investing their entire careers, or at least a good portion of their career, planning for retirement, and they're seeing a big percentage of that evaporate, I don't think it's the most compelling thing economically or politically to go out there and go, who cares about your 401k, honestly. Clay Travis, I think most people know who he is, tweeted out, your 401k was down from December of 2021 to December of 2023. That's 2 years of negative growth. Did you tweet me about your 401k during those 2 years while inflation rose to 9% as well? I bet not. Your 401k is the same value now as it was a year ago. I'm buying. You do you. And he also says the only reason you care about it now is because the media is freaking out. I think two things can be true here. I think the media, for the most part, is cheering for the stocks to plummet because they want Trump to fail. But at the same time, Jim, I'm pretty sure we did complain about the economy from December 2020 to 2023.
Let's go to the archives. Yes. Yeah. One last point, just think about like both between Afghanistan and the withdrawal, in which, you and I talked about at great length, and then the inflation and the repeated assurances. Joe Biden's like, no serious economist says we're headed towards sustained inflation. Biden's approval rating never recovered. And when Clay Travis says, people weren't paying attention, but like this mantle was getting harder on the public's perception of the Biden administration. And it fed into this idea of Joe Biden being this doddering old man who didn't know what was going on and was in denial about real problems. It's not set in stone that this is how the Trump administration is going to be perceived from here on out. But I think if you botch the economy in April of 2025, it's going to be tough to be in a better shape in April of 2026 and in November of 2026 when there's midterms and beyond. The public patience for increased prices is really, really limited. It's a big lesson in the last couple of years. But I guess we'll see.
So what does the future hold for your business? Right now, you might be wondering that question. You're not sure what the markets are going to do long term, what's going to happen with interest rates, or whether inflation is up or down. But there are certain steps you can take to protect your business and keep it moving forward. And for more than 38,000 businesses, they have future-proofed their operations with NetSuite by Oracle, the leading cloud ERP platform. It integrates key business functions like accounting, financial management, inventory, and HR into one seamless system.
Closing your books in days instead of weeks means you spend less time on past reports and more time focusing on future growth. This efficiency lets you shift your attention from historical tasks to strategic initiatives that drive business forward.
Yeah, and as part of my other work, I speak to business owners and business experts a lot, and they say, look, there's so many things that business owners need to take care of. You've got to let emerging technology take care of some of this for you. And we're at the point now where NetSuite by Oracle can take care of those things for you. Let them, and then spend your time doing what you do best. And so if I needed this product, I'd certainly use it. And in the meantime, you can download the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/martini. The guide is free to you at netsuite.com/martini, netsuite.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And turns out the whole Signal situation with the Trump National Security Team is still crazy, but maybe slightly less crazy than we thought at one time. Thanks to Tom Bevan for flagging this story. It's actually from The Guardian. He says, according to 3 people briefed on the internal investigation, Jeffrey Goldberg had emailed the campaign about a story that criticized Trump for his attitude towards wounded service members. This is obviously not this year. This is back during the 2024 campaign. To push back against the story, the campaign enlisted the help of Waltz, their national security surrogate. Goldberg's email at that time was forwarded to then Trump spokesperson Brian Hughes, who then copied and pasted the content of the email, including the signature block with Goldberg's phone number, into a text message that he sent to Waltz so that he could be briefed on the forthcoming story. Waltz did not ultimately call Goldberg, the people said, but in an extraordinary twist, inadvertently ended up saving Goldberg's number in his iPhone under the contact card for Brian Hughes, who is now the spokesperson for the National Security Council. So it appears that he was trying to add Brian Hughes, I guess, to this Signal chat that involved Pete Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and Marco Rubio and others. And by doing so, Brian Hughes did not end up on the call, but Jeffrey Goldberg did. So it's bewildering that he made that error, and it's obviously not a good thing that he ended up on this call, Jim, but it does make more sense than we thought prior.
Yeah, this is an explanation that makes, so everything sounds logical, right? A lot of people had wondered whether Jameson Greer from the U.S. Trade Representative's office was JG mixed up with another JG. This explanation makes even more sense, although it probably makes you really paranoid. In your phone's address book, are the numbers listed, the actual numbers for the people you want to reach, or are you going to end up reaching somebody else? And it's all suddenly dawning on me, we all used to have like some of us old of a certain right age, used to have paper Rolodexes and used to flip through and all that stuff. Well, when you do that, you would never automatically call the wrong person or have the wrong number listed for someone else or something like that. Maybe we all have to go back to paper Rolodexes. Maybe, Another observation, I believe it was when they were trying to track down some terrorist and they noticed that somebody had bought a burner phone and then just dialed a bunch of people. And like, well, how do you know that means that they're a terrorist or that they're part of a terrorist network? And they said, how many phone numbers do you have memorized? Maybe your spouse's, often your childhood home phone number, right? Maybe your home phone number now. But basically, most people don't walk around with a significant number of phone numbers memorized. This person had like dozens of them, which kind of made you think, aha, okay, this is someone who's not part of the normal operations or something like that. This is disappointing and frustrating, but now kind of understandable. Kind of sort of gets Mike Waltz off the hook, or at least a sense of like, he wasn't, mixing up one or the other. He thought he was sending text to Brian Hughes, which would be someone who has the right clearance and all that kind of stuff. And, there's that at no point was he consciously inviting this, and that there wasn't a matter of like, oh, you weren't looking closely enough. He thought, the phone probably had Brian Hughes as the name. And unfortunately, all of this was being sent there. So, very bad. Also, this is probably a sign where, again, when they say, U.S. government workers can use, even those with security clearances can use Signal, but they want you to use it for, let's move the meeting from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. Stuff that is not inherently classified, stuff not inherently of value. And then finally, now that we've now seen all of the text messages and Goldberg put them all out there, Goldberg, first of all, thank goodness, I appreciate him holding off and not publishing this stuff until the operation was over. I also think some of his initial descriptions maybe have overhyped it a little bit. He talked about, he said they had named the targets. And I'm looking at this, and Waltz has, typing too fast, the first target, their top missile guy. We had positive idea of him walking into his girlfriend's building, and now it's collapsed. So I just want to, their top missile guy. Okay, it's not like they named him. You could probably go through and say, all right, who's the top missile guy at the Houthis or something like that. But it's not like they're using specific names. So a little bit of an exaggeration there on Goldberg's account. But otherwise, yeah, again, guys, if you want to use Signal for the basic stuff, fine. If you're going to talk about anything sensitive or anything that would be value to our enemies, probably better to use the secure systems you're supposed to.
My other question is there anything else he tried to include Brian Hughes on since January 20th? But
that's a good point.
Conversation? I don't know. I'm guessing we would have heard about it because Goldberg would probably tell us, but I don't know.
Let me refresh on the Atlantic. Okay, no, they have not. So, or still some other journalist is out there. So,
yes, and you are entirely correct about the memorized phone number. I could probably tell you more phone numbers right now of my childhood friends than the entire list of phone numbers that I deal with on a daily basis.
In the Dangerous Click novels, one of the kind of recurring jokes is that the characters keep using older and older technology because nobody else can hack it.
Right.
There's the recurring joke in the first novel that they're using fax machines because nobody uses fax machines anymore. And I do this based on research. In real life, one of the Syrian leaders of terrorists back in the Syrian civil war used to do handwritten letters and seal it with wax, kind of like you used to see in those old Three Musketeers movies and stuff like that. And one of the characters quips, by this point we'll be in another 10 years we'll be using quill pens. But basically, if you can type it, it can be hacked. Even typewriters, they can get hold up the ribbon and see what you used keystroke by keystroke. So at some point, maybe it just makes sense to go back to those good old-fashioned Rolodexes. And because of the markets, I'm putting all of my money into paper Rolodexes, making a big comeback in the next couple of years.
Not sure I would advise
That's your
that.
bad investment advice of the day. Remember, this is not an an economics podcast, and you should not follow our advice on anything, ever.
Thank you for that disclaimer. Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Columbus of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Columbus. Join us again Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.